Most people think society runs on cooperation. But if you slow down and really observe how value moves, how time is traded, how attention is captured, you start to notice something uncomfortable. Not everything is built on collaboration. Some of it runs on extraction. Think about a normal day. You wake up, check your phone for a few minutes, go to work, complete your tasks, scroll a bit more at night, maybe buy something online, then go to sleep. Nothing dramatic, nothing extreme. Just a routine that feels normal. But if you zoom out for a second and trace what actually happened in that day, not what you did, but what moved through you, your time was spent. Your attention was captured. Your energy was directed. Your decisions were influenced. And almost all of it flowed somewhere. To a company, to a platform, to a system you didn't design. Not because anyone forced you to, but because everything around you was structured in a way that made it feel like your choice. So, the question is no longer what you did in that day. The real question is, where did all of it go? Because the real issue is not that you're being controlled, and it's not that the system is unfair. The real issue is that what feels like a normal routine is quietly structured to move your time, attention, and energy in very predictable directions. Not randomly, not equally, but toward specific points where that energy can be captured, accumulated, and used. And once you see that clearly, you realize something important. You're not just living your day. You're participating in a system that is constantly organizing your life into flows of value, whether you notice it or not. And once you begin to notice those invisible flows, you start to see that what shapes your life isn't just what you choose, but how those choices are quietly structured. This is Mind Over System, where we break down the hidden systems and ideas that shape the way you live. If your daily life is not random, then it must be structured. And that structure doesn't need to control you directly. It only needs to guide where your time, attention, and energy naturally flow. This system works through 3 core mechanisms. 1. Direction of attention. Everything begins with attention, because what you pay attention to shapes what you think about, and what you think about shapes what you do. But attention today is not neutral. It is designed, filtered, and constantly redirected. Every platform you use, every feed you scroll, every notification you receive is part of a system competing to capture and hold your focus. Not because attention is valuable in theory, but because attention can be converted into engagement, into behavior, into money. And once your attention is captured consistently, something subtle starts to happen. You don't just consume content. Your perception of reality starts to shift. What feels important, what feels urgent, what feels worth pursuing, all of it is gradually influenced by what you repeatedly see. So, by the time you make a decision, it already feels like your own. 2. Structuring of choices. Now, once attention is directed, the next step is simpler. Limit the paths you can take, not by force, but by design. You're given options, but those options are pre-shaped. Career paths that look different, but operate the same. Products that feel like personal preference, but are positioned to guide behavior. Lifestyles that appear unique, but follow identical patterns. And because these choices are presented as freedom, you don't question them. You optimize within them. You try to pick better, work harder, be smarter, without realizing that the structure itself rarely changes. So instead of asking, why am I choosing this? Most people end up asking, how do I succeed within this? And that shift is everything. Because once you stop questioning the structure, you start reinforcing it. 3. Extraction of value. Once attention is directed and choices are structured, the final step is inevitable. Extraction. Not in a dramatic way, but in a continuous, almost invisible process. Your time becomes productivity. Your attention becomes data. Your behavior becomes predictable patterns. And all of it can be measured, optimized, and scaled. A company doesn't need to control you. It only needs to position itself where your energy naturally flows. Because once it does, every action you take starts feeding into something larger than you. Your work value is created. Your scroll data is collected. You engage systems, learn. And over time, the gap becomes clear between the energy you generate and the value you actually retain. This is why two people can put in the same effort, but end up in completely different positions. Because effort alone doesn't determine outcomes. Position inside the system does. Where your attention goes. What choices are available to you, and who captures the value you create. And once you see these three mechanisms working together, you realize something that's hard to ignore. The system doesn't need to take from you by force. It only needs you to participate. You can see these mechanisms play out in ways that don't require theory, just observation. Look at how people spend their time. Hours go into platforms designed to keep them engaged, not because the content is always valuable, but because it is optimized to hold attention just long enough to create habit. Over time, that attention becomes data. That data becomes targeting. And that targeting becomes revenue. Or look at how work is structured. Most people are paid for the time they give, not for the total value that time creates. The difference doesn't disappear. It accumulates somewhere inside systems that are designed to capture and scale that gap. Even something as simple as online shopping follows the same pattern. What you see is filtered. What you choose is influenced. What you buy feeds back into the system that shaped your decision in the first place. None of this feels forced. That's exactly why it works. Let's make this real. Picture an ordinary weekday. At 8 a.m., before your feet even touch the ground, you reach for your phone. Just a few minutes, nothing serious. But what you see is not random. It's carefully arranged to hold your attention just a little longer than you intended. By 9 a.m., you're at work. The hours pass in a familiar rhythm. Emails, tasks, meetings, deadlines. You stay focused. You solve problems. You produce results. At the end of the month, you get paid. On the surface, it feels simple. Time given, money received. But beneath that simplicity, something else is happening. The value created during those hours doesn't end with your paycheck. It continues moving upward into a structure that can expand it, redistribute it, and retain far more than what you take home. Then the day winds down. You return to your phone, scrolling, watching, reacting. It feels like rest, like escape. But even here, your attention is being guided, your preferences are being shaped, and your behavior is quietly recorded. So within a single day, without noticing it, two parallel flows have taken place. You worked, and value moved through your labor. You relaxed, and value moved through your attention. Nothing felt forced. Nothing felt unusual. And that's exactly the point. Because when a system is designed well enough, participation feels like choice. Now stretch that same day over years. The pattern doesn't change. It compounds. The hours you give continue to generate more than what you receive. The attention you spend continues to train systems that learn you better than you know yourself. And slowly, something shifts, not in what you do, but in where it leads. Because when your attention is guided long enough, your perception adjusts to match it. When your choices are shaped long enough, your path begins to narrow around it. And when value is extracted long enough, the gap becomes permanent. At that point, the difference is no longer effort. Two people can live almost identical days. Wake up, work, scroll, repeat. But over time, they don't end up in the same place. One remains inside the flow, where time and attention are constantly converted into something they don't keep. The other learns to step closer to where that value is captured. Same system, different position. And that difference changes everything. At this point, the question changes. It's no longer about how hard you work or how disciplined you are. It's about whether you understand the flow you're inside. Because the system doesn't reward effort equally. It rewards position. If your time stays where it is directed, if your attention keeps going where it is pulled, if your choices remain within what is given, then no matter how much effort you add, you are still feeding the same structure. And that's the uncomfortable part. Most people are not stuck because they lack ability. They're stuck because they never see where their time, attention, and energy are actually going. So they keep optimizing their effort inside a system that was never designed for them to keep the majority of what they create. Seeing this doesn't mean you have to fight the system, and it doesn't mean you need to reject it, because you can't step outside of something you still depend on, but you can start to notice it, to see where your time actually goes, to question what is shaping your attention, to recognize which choices are truly yours, and which ones were quietly arranged for you, not to escape the system, but to stop moving through it unconsciously, because awareness doesn't change the structure overnight, but it changes how you move inside it. So maybe the question was never how hard you should push, but where everything you give is actually going. Because once you see that your time, your attention, your energy are always moving, the only thing that really changes is whether you're aware of the direction. And once you're aware, you don't just ask, what should I do next? You start asking something far more uncomfortable. In this system, am I the one deciding where my life flows? Or am I still following a direction I never truly chose?